Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I have a 38mm Air Stryker carb that I bought for the 250R project. It's used. Took it all apart, got a rebuild kit for it, and we are going and cleaned it up, and we are going to go ahead and assemble it and set it up for our bike. At least the starting setup. My starting setup, I have a CEL needle on the third clip, and we're going to run a 175 main jet and a 55 pilot to start. Should have it running a little rich, but I'd rather run a little rich to start, and then we'll lean it out. I'll have my my air ratio screw will be set at 1.5 turns out as well. So we're going to go over assembling this. This carb was used, for example, these were the original vent lines on it. They are dry, brittle, falling apart. So max flow hoses makes a really nice reproduction set. Comes in a pink that's very similar to the original OEM color hoses. Have all of our rebuild parts here. Put a new choke in it. We have a new gasket for the float bowl. We got our jets, our spring. We have our float assembly. Screws, we got an idle screw here. And we have our slide right here. So we're going to go ahead and go over the installation of all this and get this back together. I'm going to go ahead and get the camera set up, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install our jets. And then we'll put our float bowls, our floats in for the float bowl, then get the float bowl installed, and then we can put our, our air screw, our idle screw, our choke in, and get that installed. So, our main jet, screw right here. Just going to grab a wrench to snug that. Okay, so that's a 6mm hex. Just going to snug that. Don't got to kill it, it's brass, don't want to break it. Then our pilot, that's going to drop in to that hole there, and then we're just going to thread that in. And same thing, once that threads in and seats, just going to snug it. You're not trying to kill it. Now, got that installed. Now on our float assembly, this is the top, so it'll be sitting in there like this. This is what allows your fuel to pour in. So you got to get that clipped on. There we go. And then the next step is to get this on here. Whoops. Without losing that. Okay. So I'm going to kind of keep this tipped like this. And we're going to work that over there. There we go. Get that right down in there. And then we have our pin. That will then lock the float bowl in place. And this is very loose. So you got to be careful. If you tip this thing sideways, that pin will fall out. Okay, then you can turn that over and confirm that your float moves nice and easily. I'm going to put that aside because our next thing, I'm going to work this gasket into our float bowl. Okay, so I've got the gasket pressed into the float bowl. I stood the carburetor up on its end, which will make sure that that pin will stay in there. And what's going to happen is this section right here will fit right in here, and that's what locks that pin in. This, which is your overflow for your float bowl, will go right into that slot right there. So when you're putting it in, it's going to fit right in, and then it'll slide forward. And then you've got some locating bosses right there that will recess in when you push it together. Now on this carburetor, because we've got 5 vent lines, we've got double retainers, and those are going to go on the front corners like so. And the rear will just get your regular screws to hold the float bowl on. I had new screws with the rebuild kit, but it only included 3. It was missing one, so I'm reusing one of my older ones. Not a big deal. Okay, now we have our float bowl in. You can hear our float does move and confirm that that moves. I think what we'll do next is we're going to go ahead and put our air mixture screw in. There's a little spring that goes on that. Now this one I am going to seat it completely. I'm going to need a little smaller screwdriver to get that in there. So I'm going to basically turn it until it seats completely, and then I'm going to do 1.5 rotations out. So half, 1, 1.5. And that's where I'm going to set my air screw. Then as for our idle, oops, this one has the spring here as well. I'm not sure why, but the idle screw that came with the kit was not threading very nicely into the idle hole. So I put the old screw in with the spring, and this carburetor didn't even have a spring on its idle screw when I got it and disassembled it. So at least I've got the spring on it now, but this one's threading right in. And we'll put that in part way, and we'll have to adjust that accordingly once the machine is together. Okay, so we've got our idle screw in, got our air screw in. Okay, next we're going to do is put our choke assembly in. That just threads in here. There's a little O-ring on the bottom of that. think that was a 12 millimeter wrench. I'm going to have to grab that to snug that up. I'll just pull it up so it's not stopping itself from going in. Let me grab a wrench to snug that up. Okay, snug that up. It's 13 millimeter. Basically, I was able to hand tighten it all the way in and then did about a half a turn more. Don't need to kill it. It's plastic. There is an O-ring in there that seals it against the aluminum housing. And now we have those installed. Next thing we can do, might as well go ahead and do this. I'm not installing the throttle cable right now, so I'm going to drop my needle into my slide. And I'm just going to loosely install this because this needs to have the cable, the throttle cable, put through it. And this goes down in the top of the slide and actually screws into place. Okay, as you can see, there's a small hex head there. I ended up just using a pair of needle nose pliers to just screw it in about a turn and a half, just so that it locks it into place and doesn't go anywhere. And that will be our slide. And we're going to have to, again, we'll have to take that apart to put the throttle cable on. But that will slide right into place. Now our cap has a new gasket. There's a little groove in the top there. And then I'm going to put I have a new adjuster that goes in the top of the cap. And again, that's all going to, when I put the throttle cable in, that will have to be adjusted accordingly. Then we have our return spring. So the return spring will then drop down over top of that piece that locked the needle in. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little grease on the end of that, one side of that gasket, so that that sticks in there and stays there while we're seating the cap. Much better. Just put a little silicone grease on the back side of that gasket. Now at least it'll stay in place as I thread it on. Okay. And last step is going to be to put our new vent lines on. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get our vent lines installed. Put just a little silicone lube on there to help this slide on so I can slide them all the way down. Okay, we'll get the other side on. Okay. All right, and then you're going to take these hoses and feed them right through these. And then these obviously will go out the bottom of the bike. Now we've got two more to put on the sides here, and then one more to put on the bottom for our float bowl. Two more for the sides, one more for the bottom. I apologize. I thought I had hit the camera on, but I didn't. So I got one of the side vents on, and these ones, because they don't have the little nipple on the end, I am putting the spring clips on them. Just so that I have a little extra holding power. So these are a little tough to get on. They are tight. There we go. And just use your needle nose to pinch these together. Oops, now I'm just chasing that around. And we can work that right on there. And then again, that will, there we go. Okay, last one will be our float ball drain. This one I am going to throw a clip on because I have 3 of the clips. I'm going to just throw this one on the bottom. This one does have a little nipple on it. And just put just a little lube on there just to make it a little easier to slide it all the way down. And that wasn't even necessary because it's not even tight enough to hold it. So, okay. And there we go. Our carb is all back together. Once I finish getting my controls together and I actually installing the carb and putting my throttle cable in, I will show how we disassemble that, hook that in here, set that in here. But I wanted to get the carb all back together and ready to go. And that is it. That is the assembly for your 38mm Airstryker carb. Right. Hope this helps anybody that may be working on a similar project. If you like what we're doing or like following the build, please like and subscribe. If you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you very much, and have a great day.